Well, we have a lot of incredible weather to get through over the next hour here on the Weather Network. Thank you for joining us on YouTube, on the app, on our channel as well. I'm Rachel Schutzen, joined by meteorologist Rhythm Reed and Rhythm. Lee is going to be an impressive storm.
Oh, 100%. Well, it has transitioned towards a post-tropical storm, which is a nice little way to wake up. However, still those strong winds going strong.
Absolutely. This storm, even though it doesn't have hurricane status anymore, it still will have major impacts. We are already seeing 80,000 people without power in places like Nova Scotia, over 7,000 in New Brunswick. We're going to be joining Nathan Coleman live from Peggy's Cove. That will continue throughout this live stream. If you're joining us on TV, Anwar Knight will be coming in and out of the program as well. If you're joining us on YouTube or on the app, this is going to be a continuous stream, commercial free. So if you want to stay with us on the channel, awesome. We would love to have you there too. But if you would like to see the full live stream, you can join us online. Now, as we dive into this storm, this could be one of the most impactful storms of the year. We are looking at this storm now really bringing in the heavy winds, the strong rainfall. All of these elements are moving into Atlantic Canada, and this is why power outages are going to be a huge concern. I want to show you some of the images and what we're seeing on the ground right now. We take you into downtown Halifax. You can see the rainfall continues to move in. That cloud deck is going to be really thick through the day today.
Oh, 100% and very widespread.
Now, as we look at the pier, for example, you can see the waves are starting to pick up. We have seen some of the highest waves about 5 meters high. So to put that into perspective, you know, you think about your own height, 1.5 meters. This is huge waves that are coming crashing into the shore. Let's show everybody what Peggy's Cove has been looking like too, because this is where we're going to be joining Nathan Coleman live. And you can just see the dramatic images when a classic storm like this comes into Nova Scotia. Peggy's Cove certainly is a place to really witness this storm. So I want to take you now outside to Nathan Coleman. Nate, we know that the preparation when it comes to this storm has been huge, especially across Nova Scotia. We can just see the winds whipping behind you, that classic lighthouse. Nate, describe the scene at Peggy's Cove this morning.
Well, it is just incredible out here, Rachel. We've been long awaiting the arrival of Lee, and the waves and the swells have just been crashing in against the rocks here. They're literally, it looks like almost a waterfall happens on the opposite side of the rocks after these massive waves come crashing in. So they've just closed the parking lot here because there were quite a few people coming up to take a look and gathering. Security reminding people to definitely stay away from the rocks. We're keeping a safe distance here, but that is a major danger anywhere along the Atlantic coastline here. So it is windy, it is wet. The power outages just continuing to climb here as we expected. My drive out here this morning from Halifax, I encountered quite a few downed branches, just some old branches that were taken down with the wind. And as these winds remain sustained, you can expect plenty more of that. So it's a good day. Stay inside. You can keep us tuned on your live stream out here to take a look what it's looking like outside, and I'll be holding on tight, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely, Nate. And we do know that the highest risk for power outages is within Metro Halifax, down through Peggy's Cove, Yarmouth, up towards Digby, the shores of Fundy Bay, places like St. Andrew, St. John. So, Nate, we saw so much messaging yesterday from meteorologists, from the government, telling people do not go down to places like Peggy's Cove to see the swells. How important is it for people to just stay home today?
Very important, because things can really pick up in the wind. The problem is, you know, if you have a loose item, it can act as a projectile when these winds are this strong, and you don't want to get hit by any of those. So there's no real reason to go out. Any events have been canceled. I mean, there are cancellations at the airport, any ferry. There's Marine Atlantic Bay ferries. They've all canceled their crossings as well. With the conditions of the ocean, you can just look out and see here. It is incredible to watch, but you want to stay as far back as possible. Wait this one out, because you don't want to put anyone in danger for having to come out and rescue you because you got a little too close. So you want to wait until Lee passes, and I hope you stocked up. We've been giving you the messaging for days now about the fact that you may need something for 72 hours to keep you sustainable, because the power is out now to thousands. What's that number looking like, Rachel?
Yeah, Nate, as we take a look at the latest from Nova Scotia Power, for example, I'm just going to refresh this here. Yeah, we're at 83,000 now in Nova Scotia without power. And as I quickly just take a look at New Brunswick, still, yeah, close to about 7,000 without power. So, Nate, we're going to talk about the winds in a second. We're going to just give Nate a break for a sec. But now let's go over to the radar, because I just want to show everybody how huge this storm is. We saw Lee.
Yeah, they're over at the radar now.
It certainly doesn't look like a hurricane anymore. It's a huge storm. It's slow moving. The slow moving nature of it really does pose some issues for very heavy rainfall.
Exactly, because it's so slow moving, it's going to be able to dump so much rain into a specific area, mainly looking at the southern tip of Nova Scotia as well as in through New Brunswick.
So as we look at the potential for winds, we're going to go back to Nate in a second to talk winds, but show me your forecast rhythm and who would be essentially experiencing those strongest winds. It's easy to see a windy day in Atlantic Canada when there's not a post-tropical storm coming. So when there's something like this, we know things are going to get intense.
Absolutely. So we are going to see those strong winds as we head towards the afternoon and evening in through areas of Halifax, because that's when the center of the storm is going to be inching in towards inland for Nova Scotia. But we do still have those strong winds in through areas of Yarmouth through the morning period. So as we're heading towards that 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. period.
Now, when it comes to the winds, of course, you can feel the strength of the wind, but you can really see the intensity of the Atlantic. And for some people, that is the most dramatic part of this storm. So let's talk a little bit about the swells and some of those current wave heights that we're seeing. We know the Halifax Harbor was already measuring some of the peak waves close to about 5 meters.
Yeah, and when we're taking a look at the current, well, we're close to those 8 meters just off of the coast. Near the coast, we are up to about 5 meters when we're looking in areas through Halifax as well. Now, it does look like we're getting up to close to 10 meters when we're a little bit more further away from land. However, that's going to keep climbing as the system moves closer inland.
Okay, we're going to talk about some of the hurricane watches and also the post-tropical storm watches, wind warnings. That's all coming up with Rhythm. But let's go back now and show you just some of the scenes here at Peggy's Cove. You can see just how angry the Atlantic Ocean is looking like this morning. This is a live shot, so it's happening right now in Atlantic Canada. It is currently 8:10 a.m. Atlantic time. A YouTube question is coming in from Miramichi. So when are we supposed to get hit? So Miramichi, we're looking at central, northern New Brunswick. When do you think some of those heavier rain bands will start to move into that region, Rhythm?
So when we're talking about areas of Miramichi, my apologies, we are going to see those heavier bands as we've already started to see some of that rain moving inland. If we take a look at the radar, some of those heavier are going to be around the afternoon period up towards the early evening periods as this move again starts to move more inland as we go through the day.
And an interesting point about Miramichi, while you will experience some of that heavy rainfall, the winds are certainly going to be a bigger story for places like Halifax, Yarmouth, Digby along the Fundy shores. The winds won't get quite as strong up into a place like Miramichi, right? Not topping 100, let's say.
No, nothing like that. We'll get to see winds close to those 60, possibly crossing 50. However, it won't be anything as strong as the areas close to the coves near Nova Scotia is going to get.
Okay, now let's see if we can go back outside to Peggy's Cove to talk with Nathan Coleman a little bit, because we know people in Atlantic Canada, they brace for hurricane season, they know hurricane season is coming. So as we focus in on something like this, the preparation is just so important. And we know Nova Scotia Power has been working for days, essentially reinforcing a lot of the power lines and the stabilizers in between them, making sure that trees don't bring down some of the poles. So Nate, we know a lot of preparation has gone into preparing for this storm. What else can you add to this? Because we know in Atlantic Canada, you guys have a very good storm plan.
Yes, I mean, we've just been hit by so much of it in the past summer with, you know, the excessive flooding. We also had the fires. So anytime we have a big weather event coming in, the Emergency Management Office sets up its center in Dartmouth. So they're monitoring this closely with all the municipalities, like you mentioned, Yarmouth, Shelburne, you know, really in the brunt of some of these winds. But also here in Halifax, I mean, Nova Scotia Power has opened their Emergency Operations Center. They've staged crews in and around the province to prepare to respond to this. But the issue can be, you know, if winds are gusting above 80 kilometers per hour, then they can't get up in the bucket to restore it. So they may know exactly where the problem is, and they could have a truck right there, but they have to wait until those winds die down. That's why we say to prepare for 2 to 3 days, because it could be an easy fix, but they just have to wait for that to happen. And of course, all events have been shut down across Halifax, so there's no real reason to go out and be out. You should be inside. This is the time to have your storm chips. I know the chip aisles were looking empty with people stocking up, so that's kind of classic here when we have a big storm coming. That's the fun part, but you really want to make sure that you don't venture out in this kind of weather, because things can be flying through the air, tree branches, and you don't want to get hit.
Absolutely. Okay, Nathan Coleman, we're actually just welcoming our TV audience back into this segment shortly. So this is playing right now nationally, right across Canada. You mentioned a term, storm chips. And before I started working here at the Weather Network, did you know what a storm chip was, Rhythm?
I absolutely did. But then again, I'm a big weather nerd, so.
I did not know this term, storm chips. So for everyone who's joining us right now across the country, people in Atlantic Canada have been buying the storm chips. What exactly does that mean?
Well, this term, it was invented by a CBC radio personality. It was about 5-6 years ago that there was a big winter storm, and it's happened for a long time. But she coined it, storm chips, and people just go out. When there's a big storm, maybe your power goes out, you can't cook, you need something to eat, something to snack on. So people buy bags of potato chips around here, and it became a phenomenon. I mean, Covered Bridge, which is a big potato chip factory in New Brunswick, actually branded storm chips, so they have all types of flavors in their storm chips, and whenever there's a big storm coming, you go out and those chip aisles are empty. So there you have it. You got to have your flashlight, you got to have your candles and your storm chips with you. So lots of people indoors now, and I hope you have some board games too, because it can be fun to sit inside during a power outage, but you want to stay safe. You want to watch your candle as well, and make sure you don't leave that unattended if you're using that as a light source. But a lot of people have their batteries charged on their cell phone for the flashlight that's on that, and maybe they're watching along now because a lot of people also have battery banks along with all their chargers ready to go.
All right, Nate, and I just want to update you too. One of our producers behind the scenes, Jenny, she says it was Stephanie Domet. That was the woman who coined the term storm chip. She hosts Main Street Halifax program on CBC Radio 1. So, hey, that's awesome. Nate, I'm going to give you a break for another second, but when we come back, I want to talk about how much weather people in Nova Scotia have had to experience and sort of what the reaction to Lee coming in is. So, Nate, we're going to join you in a couple minutes, but first, I just want to get the audience up to date on all of the weather statements, the watches, the warnings, because things have really changed quite a bit. And remember, these are issued by Environment Canada, so we're the communicator to you when it comes to all of this really vital and important messaging.
Absolutely. So when we are taking a look, we do have tropical storm warnings all throughout areas of Nova Scotia, as well as stretching in towards New Brunswick. And then we do also have storm surge warnings right along the coast of Nova Scotia. We have that risk of waves hitting 8 to 12 meters. Now with this, there's also that tropical storm cyclone statement all across the Maritimes stretching into Quebec, but we also do have hurricane watches in places through areas of Halifax all the way down to Yarmouth.
And if you're just joining us right now, at about 5 a.m. Eastern Time, Lee officially lost its title as a hurricane. It is now a post-tropical storm, but that hurricane watch, it really just helps to describe the characteristics, the weather elements that will be coming into play with the strong surf, the winds that could be extremely damaging, the heavy rainfall, really all of those elements coming together. So if any of that messaging starts to change as we go throughout the hour and throughout the morning here on the Weather Network, of course, we'll communicate that to you. And we will be having a live stream as well in the afternoon, because these winds are just beginning. We're just seeing the start of the intensity of this storm. There really is a lot more to go as we go throughout the day today. Rhythm, just in the last hour, the change of power outages within Nova Scotia. We started this morning, there was 30,000 people without power. Now we have 88,000 people in Nova Scotia without power. So let's now take a look at the size of this storm, because that's something that a lot of meteorologists have really been commenting on. it doesn't look like a hurricane at all. It actually looks more like an incredible nor'easter.
Yeah, it does. And it kind of has that comma shape. So it doesn't have that full hurricane shape that we're usually used to seeing with the eye and that wraparound. And because of that, that's why it's become a post-tropical storm. Now, the winds are still at a hurricane level, so a Category 1 hurricane level. Those winds are still at 130, so that's why we still have those hurricane watches in place. But when it comes to the shape of it, it is no longer that hurricane. So yeah.
Okay, now Rhythm, one thing that I'm noticing on here, the movement, northerly direction, 26 kilometers an hour. That is a really slow movement of the storm, and why does that create problems?
So that slow movement is that it gives it vital time in order to dump more rain into a specific area. So let's take a look at the total amount of precipitation that we would be expecting in through areas of Nova Scotia as well as New Brunswick today. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, the shape of this storm, it really is incredible. And the way that the rain bands will be so persistent and dramatic over New Brunswick, that can be an issue because of how slow it's moving.
Exactly. That is going to be the main issue. So when we're taking a look at that, flash flooding risk is still there for areas in New Brunswick as well as Nova Scotia because of it being so slow moving and those bands of rain continuing on throughout the day today, as well as when we head towards that center entering inland.
Now, for people who are just tuning in right now, the wind and the swells, that can be sometimes the most dramatic part of the storm as you're looking at a place like Peggy's Cove, for example. Can we go to a few live cams just so we can show the audience what Peggy's Cove is looking like at this moment? So right now it is 8:19 a.m. in Atlantic, Canada, and you can see I could just watch this camera for an hour.
Oh, me too. Just every single wave just crashing on shore is quite phenomenal. And I don't know if you've noticed, in between a few of the times, the waves have gotten significantly high.
Yeah, and it really just depends when exactly you're watching. So someone from YouTube, Joanne Mott, just says she is in Digby right now, and what's the situation looking like? We do know that Digby is a place that does have an extremely high potential for winds over 100 kilometers an hour. We know Digby also is at risk for power outages, and it looks like some of those swells really moving into that area, and also the potential for very strong winds through here too.
Exactly. So when we're taking a look back at the winds, as we're going to go through the day, it's going to reach those high 80s to even close to 90 kilometers an hour, especially around the afternoon in towards the evening period. Now, with that combined with the total amount of rain, it's going to be a heavy day for sure in through areas of Digby.
Okay, let's see if we can bring Nathan Coleman back into the program now, because we know people in Nova Scotia have endured so much when it comes to weather this summer. It started with the fires, then the floods, and I can't even say one catastrophic flood. There was two catastrophic flooding events this summer. So now we prepare for hurricane season, and it really just seems to be layer upon layer of intense weather in Nova Scotia.
Absolutely. And the other thing is that not too long ago, just earlier this week, we did have that rain event that left the ground saturated. Now with more rain, it kind of heightens that risk of trees possibly falling out of the ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we see the ground so saturated like that, and Rhythm, to add on top of that, there's so many leaves, there's so much foliage. It makes everything so much heavier. The ground already so unstable and wet, these winds coming in so strong, and that is easily when we can see trees down on power lines, power outages start to increase. It really is such a domino effect. Okay, it looks like we have Nathan Coleman ready for us now. He is in Peggy's Cove. Nate, thank you for staying strong, staying anchored there. I know you know how to do it in Atlantic Canada. But let's talk about the reaction of Lee. This storm, we have been watching it for so long. It's been a slow-moving storm. The intensity and the anxiety, I'm sure, building, especially within Nova Scotia. Fires to floods, now to hurricane season. What's the general reaction when people talk weather this summer, now into the fall in Nova Scotia?
Yes, Rachel. Well, there's always a concern that when you do have an incoming weather system, I mean, you can do things to prepare. And we knew that this was a massive storm. It was a Category 5 at one point. but once it reaches these northern, colder temperatures, it does weaken, and now it's, of course, post-tropical. We predicted that would happen, but there's always the chance that it could overachieve. No one expected, rainfall totals of 300 millimeters this past summer during a training thunderstorm. So that, caused some major concerns, and there's always the concern, if a storm stalls over us, that we could see that kind of flooding again. So people have been a little bit on edge here. We're batten down the hatches. You do what you can do to prepare here. I'm standing out here in Peggy's Cove. Our camera operator is keeping safe in behind a building here, but we just heard a loud bang and look over at the parking lot, which is closed, and it was a large garbage container that flew over in the force of this wind. And these are built to stand up. This is Peggy's Cove, but that gives you an idea of the strength of the winds here, and just massive waves crashing against the rocks. The sea extremely choppy. I spoke to a fisherman earlier who is anticipating his fishing shed where he keeps the lobster traps to fully flood with the storm surge. So he's prepared for that. You can be kind of used to that kind of thing happening, but here we are, and I think the visuals tell the story. It is windy out here.
Absolutely. And Nate, just within the last few minutes, our TV audience has come back, and we'll welcome you now onto the channel. Thank you for joining us as we continue this live stream. The weather at Peggy's Cove has really changed. So for our TV audience who's just seeing this for the first time, Nate, can you sort of explain how those winds have picked up and how the swells have just become so intense behind you?
Yes, I mean, it's really picked up in intensity over the past hour or so. We started the day here, you can see some big waves coming in, and then the owner of the restaurant here in Peggy's Cove came and said, the parking lot is closed. We need people to move back, because they could see the winds picking up within the next hour. So we moved our vehicle. The deck here still remains open. We're at a safe distance, not venturing out on the rocks. All of the rocks are wet here with the size of the waves just crashing in here. So very dangerous conditions along the coastline here with the storm surge warning. You want to stay back, stay away. Best to stay inside, because nothing is out on the water. All ferries in the region have been canceled. So that gives you an idea of what it's looking like here.
Absolutely. Nate, thank you so much for your excellent storytelling and really showing us how dramatic and intense it looks like at Peggy's Cove. We're going to check in with you in the next 5 to 10 minutes. But first, Rhythm, there's been a lot of questions coming in on YouTube, and I encourage our audience to join us on YouTube and send us your questions, because we love being able to connect with you and answer some of these. So the first, Rhythm, comes from Matt Carmichael, and he says, I was wondering if you could explain at what point they determined the storm has become post-tropical. So if you're just tuning in, the storm officially became post-tropical, no longer a hurricane at 5 a.m. Eastern time. He says, I always wondered what they look at when determining that exact point of classification. I think we have a bit of a weather nerd.
Yeah, so with this, when we're taking a look at this, we still have those strong winds. And when we do have those strong winds, a lot of people just put it into a category, oh, it's going to be a category 1 or 2. But we're also looking at the structure of it.
Right.
So when we do see the structure, Rachel, does this structure of it look like anything like a hurricane?
It doesn't. It really just looks like a big storm going into Atlantic Canada.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that, since there's no structure behind it, there is not going to be, well, a hurricane anymore. It's just a storm at this point. But those winds are still hanging on strong.
All right, so we are just about to lose you here with our TV audience. But remember, if you're joining us on YouTube or on the app, we're staying with you because we got another question from YouTube. And this one comes from Michael Hickey. Do you expect any storm cells to have tornado potential with this? When we tracked Idalia, we did see that cold front coming on, and there was a lot of tornado potential in Florida. Does that sort of equal a similar situation in Atlantic Canada?
Well, not really. Remember, Florida, you have so much more humid air, you have so much heat there. In through Atlantic Canada, it is cooler air. So that's why we don't really see that potential of thunderstorms, maybe a thunderstorm, but no tornado activity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we could get embedded heavy downpours, though,
100%.
right?
That is expected 100%. Just because the way that this system is going to move, there's so much moisture in the atmosphere. When we're taking a look at things like PWAT, there's heavy amounts amounts of PWA coming inland. And
Precipitable water in the atmosphere.
Thank you. So precipitable water in the atmosphere. So we've talked a lot about this when we've had other systems come through Nova Scotia this year. And looking at this, there's heavy amounts of precipitable water that's going to be associated with any tropical system, hurricane or storm. So with that, we have those heavy downpours that are going to be expected. And again, since it's moving so slow, we're going to see a lot of rainfall in through the areas.
All right, Rhythm, I want you to get set up with some of the watches and warnings, if you don't mind. I just want to update the audience here. We officially have hit 90,000 customers without power in Nova Scotia. This number has dramatically risen over the last 90 minutes. Within New Brunswick, just refreshing this here, there's 68 outages, and that's affecting just over 7,000 people. And then within PEI, we don't want to forget about you. The last we updated, okay, there was only one outage in PEI, so you certainly aren't experiencing the worst of it yet, but we do expect to see those winds really starting to increase across the island, across PEI, as we go into this afternoon. But Rhythm, for now, let's talk about some of these tropical cyclone statements.
Yeah, so we're going to start with the tropical cyclone statement. It is widespread throughout the Maritimes, even stretching all the way into Quebec. But it's a tropical storm warning that is widespread throughout areas of Nova Scotia, as well as pushing into New Brunswick. We're looking at those gusts coming close to 70 to 100 kilometers, and that storm surge. Now, we've seen those waves at Peggy's Cove, and they've been quite high. So we are looking at wave heights being at peaking around 8 to 12 meters.
Now, Rhythm, do you have that storm surge graphic in your sequence? Because I think that would be interesting to show the audience. I'll give you a second to pull it up. But you know, we often talk about storm surge. Oh, we're just showing you a live shot here at Peggy's Cove. Look at that, the dramatic. This was actually about an hour ago. You can see the swells. But I want to talk a little bit more about storm surge because you'll often hear us talk about it here at the Weather Network. It can be the most dramatic and the deadliest part of the storm. This is when the winds literally push the waters on shore. So Rhythm, let's talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, so with the storm surge, what we're looking at, especially in through the Bay of Fundy, is the waves peaking around 1 meter, even getting higher than that. And with that, we do not expect them to get as high as something we might see somewhere else, like further south with a stronger storm. But yet, 1 meter is approximately a floor, not half a floor or something.
Yeah, 1 meter. So essentially, it's not as tall as a person, but it certainly can make a major impact. Now, as we look at a place like Peggy's Cove, for example, this also coincides with a bit of a higher tide. So you have a higher tide, you have these strong swells, you have storm surge coming in, and that's why a place like this essentially should be shut down today, because we see such dangerous conditions for anyone who would be venturing out on the rocks. Now, Rhythm, we have another question that's come in from Harry Posner. He says, what is happening in the eye of the storm? So that is, you know, such a hurricane question when people want to see that really nice classified eye of the storm. We've really lost that with Lee.
Yeah, we don't have an eye anymore. Since it's a post-tropical storm, it's just looking like the center of the storm. Now, the center of the storm can still bring about some rough downpours as well as winds as it moves more inland. However, there's no structure that's left with it anymore.
All right, and we just have a few comments coming in from YouTube. Matthew Hinley has said, in Charlotte County, it's very windy now, but it's not that wet. Will the winds grow as it gets wetter, or will the winds die with the water? It's my first major storm on the East Coast, and power is out already. Matthew, I think it's important to say that when we talk about these peak winds, we're really just getting into the worst of it. And we don't want to create any fear or any anxiety around this, but the strength and the structure of this storm is really just pushing the worst of the weather into Nova Scotia as we go over the next 3 hours, let's call it, right?
So just as we head towards that afternoon period, that's when we're going to see that center of the storm pushing in towards areas of Nova Scotia, and that's when we're going to see those strong winds and heavy rainfall.
All right, this here is a live look at Peggy's Cove. You can see the intensity of the Atlantic. In the Halifax Harbor, we did have some of the peak wave heights around 5 meters. I don't have a current estimate at Peggy's Cove right now, but I think that's a lot more than 5 meters.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It really is such a dramatic scene. Now, I just wanted to talk, Rhythm, quickly about some of the prep that people have done in Nova Scotia to get ready for this. People buying generators, you know, they're filling their bathtubs with water, making sure they have cash on hand, because if the power's out, you can't use ATMs, you can't use Interact. Power crews have been prepping for days, bringing cars into garages. Emergency shelters have been set up right across Nova Scotia for homeless people. Fishermen's tying in their boats. There has been so much prep underway. So now people really just waiting for the largest impacts.
100%. And for all those folks that have made those prep, it is better to be prepared than to be sitting around.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to be looking to check in with Nathan Coleman. That is coming up. But Rhythm, let's talk a little bit about, we just had that comment about the eye of the storm, and it made me think about, we're not calling Lee's eye of the storm the eye anymore. We're calling it the center of the storm. And let's talk a little bit about why that's important. And we're just about to bring our TV audience back into the picture too. So I think this is a perfect segue and a perfect segment to talk about the center of the storm and why it packs really the most intensity.
When we're talking about the center of the storm, like supposedly we have the eye of the storm. What we're looking at is a lot of convection in and around the area of the center. So if we can take a look, so somewhere around here would have been something like the eye of the storm. We're looking at a lot of convection, so we're looking at thunderstorms, heavy downpours in through the area. But as we get further away from that, what we end up seeing, so around this area, right around here where we're getting those first bands of rain, it's not as strong. So you're still going to be expecting those rainfall, but it's not enough convection in order to make those rain totals stronger or heavier.
Gotcha. All right, welcome back to our TV audience. We were just talking about the center of the storm, not calling it the eye of the storm. It certainly has lost that structure, but the center of the storm and why it has such a big impact. We got another question coming in from YouTube. Are we still expecting to see winds 100 kilometers an hour through New Brunswick, 60 to 100 millimeters of rain? Okay, so it really depends where you are in New Brunswick. Rhythm, I'll set you up with that one.
Absolutely. When we're taking a look at in through New Brunswick, we can still see winds getting close to 80, possibly 90 kilometers an hour if you're in further towards the south. But when it does come to those 100 kilometers, you will be missing the brunt of it through New Brunswick. But when it does come to those rainfall totals, well, the rainfall totals are still going to be quite heavy in and around areas of St. John's and stretching all the way up towards the northeastern end of New Brunswick.
All right. Another question from YouTube here. Coming from Nova Scotia, should we expect road flooding in the near future? Is there a threat to neighborhood roads? I know the geography of Nova Scotia or of Halifax, and there really is so much of a downpour towards the waterfront. That, of course, plays a huge impact. With heavy rainfall, we're not expecting to see the heaviest of it within Nova Scotia, but I want to see if we can bring Nathan Coleman back into our live stream right now. He's joining us from Peggy's Cove because, Nate, I think you'll be able to give us sort of a better look at what regions could be experiencing flooding. Of course, as we went throughout this past summer, we saw 2 catastrophic flooding events, one in July, one in August. This system is not expected to bring as much rainfall with it, but it really is the larger impacts that come with it. The heavy rainfall mixed with the strong winds, mixed with some of those power outages. I think we're just working on getting Nathan Coleman back. Okay, Nate is with us, joining us live from Peggy's Cove. Nate, I got a couple questions for you, but the first one, what do you think about the potential for roads being flooded across Nova Scotia? Oh, it looks
really
like
about trees being down. Trees being down in the wind. I just received a report that St. Peter's, right in front of St. Peter's Church in Hackett's Cove, there's a massive tree down and it's blocking the road. So that's cutting off that area. So that is a concern with these strong winds. It's not so much the rain here in the Halifax area, though. You do want to prepare for that. There is the chance that if we get some localized areas with some major flooding, you always want to be cautious for road washouts if you are traveling around. But right now, it's really the strength of these winds blowing trees down because the ground is already so saturated. And when you have that, it weakens the trees and allows them to be blown over even easier. And you can guarantee there's a lot of saturation in the forests here from the kind of summer we had. So we'll be seeing quite a few trees down.
Absolutely, Nate. And you know, Nate, we have a couple questions coming in from YouTube, and they want us to talk a little bit more about Truro. Do you think you could get into Truro, you know, being a floodplain with increased risk of flooding through that area with the high tide, with the new moon? The bay really narrows up through here. Can you just chat a little bit more about Truro and some of the risks through that area?
Well, in the Truro area, you know, you are, you know, about an hour's drive north of Halifax, and I think, you know, some of the concern is with, you know, the high tide coming in. It's right along there. You do get a tidal bore in Truro, but the good thing about this time of year is we aren't at the full moon phase, so these aren't the highest of the high tides that we get throughout the month. So that is, you know, a relief. But of course, you know, you do want to be cautious if you do live along the water, because the water levels will be elevated with this. We're looking here just along the Atlantic coastline, of course, and you're seeing the big waves crashing in. But if that funnels up, you know, in towards the Bay of Fundy, that's also a concern. So the bigger threat, I think, you know, we're looking at a potential sting jet that could happen in Halifax with these stronger winds. That could be a major issue as well. But of course, in Truro, you want to be cautious if you live along the water, and there's that risk of flooding right along Park Street there. That always tends to flood in the spring. But we'll be monitoring this closely to see just how high our rainfall totals will be in that area. Do you have an idea of the forecast for the rainfall totals right there in Truro?
Yeah, you know what? I'll get Rhythm to just pull that up. We'll get that in a second. But Nate, I just want to ask you, a viewer on YouTube commented and said, why is Nate not in Yarmouth? So what was the decision between Yarmouth and Peggy's Cove?
Well, we knew that this was going to transition. It's going to be a post-tropical storm. So really, when you're looking at a hurricane coming in, a lot of storm chasers want to be in the middle of the eye of the storm, so they can be there as the storm comes right on land. But this doesn't have an eye. It's spread out as a post-tropical storm. We are getting some of the highest wind speeds here in Peggy's Cove and Halifax, so it will be strong winds. I know there are some storm chasers down in the Yarmouth area, but we wanted to maintain a signal and remain safe here, and be able to report to you live. If you get down in that area and you lose power, you might lose cell coverage, and then you're not going to be hearing from me until tomorrow. So we're staying, keeping you updated from here in Peggy's Cove. If there is, you know, any type of damage in the Yarmouth area, we can travel down there when it's safe to do so. But we didn't want to get stranded down there.
Yeah, good point, Nate. Nate, I just want to tell you, I know I've been asking you a lot of questions from YouTube, but there's also just a ton of comments, people saying that they love you and they are just really happy that you are staying safe, but you're bringing us amazing coverage. And someone also said that you deserve a double-double. Would that be your order right now at Tim Hortons?
Well, it's funny, this morning I ordered 2 extra large coffees because I anticipated that we'll be out here for a while, so I drank one on the way here, but I've got one waiting for me. I can drink it cold, so I'm safe that way. I was actually kind of genuinely looking forward to the amount of coffee I'm going to drink this weekend.
Nate, you are keeping the energy and the spirit up. Thank you so much, Nate. We are going to check in with you again in about the next 10 minutes, so get dry if you can. You know, when you're covering a snowstorm, you can jump into the car and you can get warm.
Yeah.
But when you're wet,
oh,
you're wet.
Yeah, and it's like if you're wet and then all your clothes get heavy. It's just,
I know. Nate has a tough job this morning. We love Nathan Coleman. He's built for this kind of weather. He loves it. It's his passion, and we're lucky to have him on the channel and on the live stream this morning. Now, Rhythm, let's talk a little bit about Truro again. We just had that comment about the rainfall that's expected through the area.
Yeah, so Truro is not going to get that heavy of a hit of it. We're looking closer to those 30 to 50 millimeters. Still heavy, no doubt. However, we're not going to be crossing those 50 plus to 100 millimeters. But I also want to take a moment to highlight PEI, because there's been a lot of comments about people wanting us to highlight it. So when it does come to PEI, again, they will not be expecting as much rain in through the area, still getting close to those 30 to 20 millimeters of rain, even crossing 40. But let's take a look at the wind gusts right now. So in through Charlottetown, we are starting to get those wind gusts up towards 42 kilometers an hour. Definitely very high also in through areas of Halifax. Yeah. But when we are looking towards towards the afternoon and evening period as that center, and I'm going to keep prefacing by saying that center because it's so important to this, that's when we're going to be crossing those 80 kilometers an hour winds as we head towards that afternoon to early evening period.
And do you think that that's likely when the waves along the Halifax coast and Peggy's Cove will become even higher?
Absolutely.
Okay.
With the winds, because the winds are really going to be driving a lot of those waves as well. That's when we're going to be seeing those swells of waves up through the Bay of Fundy as well as in through Charlottetown.
So that means this situation is going to get even worse. This is what Peggy's Cove was looking like this morning. You saw the images just minutes ago with Nathan Coleman. It really is just such an impressive scene when you see those waves crashing onto the shore. Now, Rhythm, I want to talk a little bit again about the center of the storm. You just mentioned it, and we just had a question on YouTube saying it hasn't fully landed in Nova Scotia, right? So I think what a lot of people are talking about is, you know, the center, the eye of the storm. When we think about a hurricane, often people are looking at that eye. When will it officially make landfall? We're in a situation right now where Lee is no longer a hurricane. It does not have a structured eye of the storm. So we won't really be bringing you an exact time and location as to when this system makes landfall. But yes, you are right. There is a center of the storm that will make its way on land, and that is likely to bring the most intense and impactful weather. So Rhythm, do you want to sort of walk us through that and show us where that center of the storm is, and I guess who could be more impacted by it, who will see the worst weather with it, when those winds will pick up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so when we are taking a look at our current look from the satellite, we do see that basically what we're going to be calling the center, which is a warm center right now, right in through here. It is quite a warm center, that's why it's there. Now, as we do head through the afternoon period, we are going to expect that to move more inland in towards areas of the western end of Nova Scotia as well as New Brunswick. Taking a quick look at
and I guess that's why a lot of people were asking about Yarmouth just being so much closer to the center of that storm, right?
Exactly. So when we're taking a look at when that center is going to be becoming more inland, let's take a look at the long term as well, because it's not only just going to be a one-day event. We're also going to have it a little bit stretch into tomorrow, but more as a tropical depression, rather a
post-tropical
storm. Exactly. So we're looking at it moving more inland around that afternoon period, affecting areas of that Yarmouth. That's what we're looking at. And as we head through the day today into tomorrow, it's going to do a little bit of a bend towards Newfoundland. However, it's going to lose so much of its energy as it goes through today.
Absolutely. All right, welcome back to our TV audience. Thank you for sticking with us. Your national weather picture. Rhythm, let's just quickly talk about the West. It's so calm. We're not really seeing much going on at all.
Yeah.
Ontario may get a few sprinkles of rain as we go through today and tomorrow, but other than that, it's really just all Lee, right?
100%. Lee really came at the best time in the sense that we don't have so much happening across the country.
At least there's not a huge Colorado low that's tracking across the prairies, right?
Oh, thank goodness for that.
Yeah, lots of sunshine for you in the prairies. So thanks for sticking with us on TV so we can get you that full national picture. But yeah, it really is Lee that is taking over all of these headlines. Let's talk a little bit about the rainfall. The last we looked at the status of this storm, the sustained winds were still about 130 kilometers an hour, and it was moving at 26 kilometers an hour towards the north. We see a bit of an issue with this because of how slow it's moving and how much rain it can drop. So let's look at how much rain has fallen, let's say over the last 24 hours, and how much more is to come, because I think that's going to paint a pretty good picture for how saturated the ground is going to be.
Yeah, so when we're taking a look at the last 24 hours, we've really seen that rain moving in towards that midnight period, late Friday. And then when we take a look, a lot of the heavier bands of rain are going to be and have been through areas of St. John's as well as New Brunswick, and a little bit towards Yarmouth, rather.
You know what, Rhythm, I'm just going to stop you for a sec. We're going to cut to this live shot here. Look at this.
Oof.
We have people in Peggy's Cove. I'm not 100% sure what they're doing. It looks like they're trying to maybe tie down a garbage can. Maybe a garbage can. You can just see how, look at the hood of that person and their pants just whipping in the wind. You can see just how strong the winds are coming in Peggy's Cove. I'm actually going to ask some of our producers if you can you get us some wind readings in Peggy's Cove, because I would be curious to see what some of those peak wind gusts would be in an area like that. What do you think that is, with a garbage can?
I think it is a garbage can. I don't know what else be, to be honest.
Yeah, and interesting. And you know, it's just these quick little moments where those strong wind gusts come in and how intense the weather can be just in that small time frame. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we are taking a look at Peggy's Cove, we can take a look at the wind gusts as of right now. So as of 8 a.m. throughout areas of Halifax, still crossing 93. So Peggy's Cove may be closer to those 80 to 90 as well.
Okay, and remember, we are just going to see the real intensity of these winds form over the next 2 to 3 hours. This is when some of the strongest stuff will be moving towards the Halifax area. Now, Rhythm, I totally cut you off. We were just about to talk about the rainfall. Let's look at that heavy swath of rain. I just wanted to get that shot in. That was really something.
Yeah, let's take a look over the last 3 hours as well. That's when we've really seen this rain accumulate, getting closer to those 15 to 20 millimeters in areas through St. John's, and this is only going to grow. This is just the morning.
So what is our forecast for rainfall? Because I know a lot of people were really focused on where the heaviest swath of rain would set up. So paint that picture for us right now.
Yeah, so the heaviest swath of rain is honestly going to be right through areas of Yarmouth up towards New Brunswick, looking at possibly 60 to even 100 millimeters locally in through some of those areas. Now, with those heavy downpours, we can expect it to go, rain rates to be between 10 to even 20 millimeters an hour.
So the ground is going to become very saturated. It actually already is very saturated. So trees coming down, it could be quite easy, especially if we see these winds over 60, 70, even 100 kilometers an hour. That heaviest rainfall moving into places like Fredericton, we definitely could see localized flooding in through a region like this. The Fundy Shores, localized flooding will be a heightened concern. I want to draw everyone's attention into PEI. What do you think the rainfall situation will be like for a place like Summerside or for Charlottetown, let's say?
So again, they're not luckily going to get the heaviest amount. They will still be accumulating anywhere between 20 to 30 millimeters of rain, maybe even going a little bit higher. However, luckily they will be missing that, but those winds are really going to pick up as we have that low starting to move more inland, and that's going to cause a lot of the trees to fall down, as well as a lot of other impacts as well.
Now, a lot of people have been talking about impacts, and they've been asking us, you know, what kind of damage could we see in a place like Halifax? Well, it's easy to say toppled trees, down power lines are quite likely. We could look at, you know, someone who didn't bring in their patio furniture, things like this becoming airborne. Nathan Coleman was saying that he heard a loud bang as he was broadcasting from Peggy's Cove, and that was actually an industrial-sized garbage can being flipped over. So as we take a live look here at that Halifax waterfront, you can see just an absolutely soaking situation. If you have anything in your backyard right now that you think could go airborne, could smash into a window, smash into a car, it would be a good time now to start bringing things in, because over the next few hours you may find that the conditions have just deteriorated so much that you don't want to be outdoors. This is what Peggy's Cove is looking like. You can see the waves just really continuously whipping up here. I want to see if we can get Nathan Coleman back into the picture. This is our live shot right now. Nate, there has been so much love for you on YouTube. People just really enjoy your reporting, enjoy your storytelling. I am certainly one of those fans. Nate, talk to me about covering hurricanes in Atlantic Canada. You know, what are the challenges? What are some of the highlights? You have been with us now for over a decade, so there's a lot of stories to tell.
Yes, definitely a lot of stories to tell, a lot of challenges, but I just wanted to show you this observation deck at Peggy's Cove has made things a little bit easier out here, because this didn't exist a few years ago, but they built this up, and you were talking earlier about how they're putting up this rope here. This is actually the pathway that would lead you down to the rocks, so they wanted to put the rope up. That was the owner of the restaurant, just so people know it's not safe to go anywhere near the rocks here. So that's been shut off here. But, you know, you can remain a little bit safe up on this platform. So I'm thankful that we have at least this. We also have, you know, our camera operator, Dave Hodge. He's huddling in behind a little bit of a overhang in the washroom area here, so we can bring you this live coverage. So yeah, it can be a challenge to broadcast out here. I've seen major changes over the years. Right now we're doing this all from a backpack. The Dejero, which is broadcasting, used to have to have a big truck but now we can come to you live from a backpack, so we're very mobile. We can get in and around. I'll give you another little walking tour up here because it could get windy right here because this is almost like a wind tunnel when I walk up this area. But yeah, it's always interesting to watch a hurricane as it tracks over the ocean, and then you finally get to see what the impacts are like here in Nova Scotia. I know quite a few storm chasers from the U.S. have traveled to Nova Scotia just to see these impacts. So it's good to be here on the ground. Of course, the big thing is you want to remain safe. And here we are. I told you this would be some of the windiest areas, so, you know, just demonstrating here what the wind is like. Like a human barometer.
Wow, Nate. I can hear the winds. I can see the intensity of that wind. Michael Carter, our meteorologist behind the scenes, he was just updating us saying the winds at Peggy's Cove gusting to about 84 kilometers an hour. Now, it's funny, us working here at the Weather Network, the only time I've been to Peggy's Cove is when the weather looks horrible and awful like that. Nate, do you ever go to Peggy's Cove when the weather is just nice?
I do sometimes. It's not too far from me. And I mean, normally the rocks are just covered. Hundreds of people, especially this time of year. You have tour bus after tour bus pulling up, people getting out. It's, you know, one of the most iconic lighthouses in all of North America. So right now, I'm the only one out here.
It looks really amazing behind you, Nate. And we are just about to welcome our TV audience back into the live stream. So Nate, for our audience that is joining us nationwide right now, can you just explain to them the significance of Peggy's Cove and the winds that you are experiencing right now?
Yes, well, I'm out here. Peggy's Cove, you know, is an iconic spot with the lighthouse here. There are fishermen who fish right out of the cove, and that is a sheltered area. So we're on the more exposed side of it to show you a look at the waves. But back in the little sheltered cove, that's where all the boats are tied off. But I was speaking to a fisherman who anticipates his fishing shack is really going to get flooded with this because of the surge, the high tide, and the waves are being pushed in. So we'll go give you a look at that a little bit later. But right now we're out of the exposed area. You can see the height of the waves. I mean, the rocks are jagged, and you do not want to be anywhere near the coast, because if you fall in there, you know, with the rip current, you wouldn't last long. So they even have a security guard on sunny days who now patrols to make sure people don't get too close, because there have been quite a few injuries and even death that have occurred here from people getting too close to the water. And especially when you have a storm like this, massive waves crashing in, it can be quite dangerous. They've closed the parking lot here. You want to stay away from the coastline as Lee passes through. And we've been warning people about the surge. Prepare your property if you do live along the coast, and it has arrived.
Absolutely. Nathan Coleman, thank you so much for braving the elements, for bringing us the latest in Peggy's Cove. When we look at the waves that are crashing behind Nate there and how angry the Atlantic looks, I always think, how high would that be? How would you measure it? Lucky for you, we have some numbers.
Yeah.
So let's jump into them.
So buoys that are near Halifax, just a little bit off Peggy's Cove, we're looking at about 6 meters
Wow.
when it comes to those waves.
And that's grown about
Yeah,
over
we really
just
moved
the
a lot.
last, like, 30 minutes or so.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we were sitting at around those 5 meters as we were setting up for this, but we're over 6 meters at this point, which is how high? Rachel?
Yeah, that is very high. Now, as we talk about the power outages, something that's also going up, we are now officially over 100,000 without power across Nova Scotia. As we look at a place like the Annapolis Valley, this has been a question that's coming in on YouTube. Do you think the center of the storm will go across that area? And for our TV audience, I want to remind you, you can communicate to us through YouTube if you want to ask some questions about your area. So of course we would love to hear them.
But when it does come to the center of the storm, what we're going to be seeing, it's moving more in that north-northwesterly direction. So it is going to be close to the Annapolis Valley. However, it will be missing that core of it, will be missing the area, looking mainly at those heavier rain bands just towards that New Brunswick area.
Okay, and Rhythm, just to update you, 6 meters is almost 20 feet.
Oof.
I had to Google that one. I cannot do math that fast with the pressure of live TV, okay? But yeah, we are talking about some really intense waves, intense winds, some strong rainfall. The questions that we have been getting on YouTube have been amazing. So again, please keep asking them. If you need me to convert feet to meters, I have a computer here and I can continue to do it.
Yeah,
okay?
even I need like that meter to feet so I can put it in perspective of, okay, I'm this tall,
I know.
so it's this high.
It is tough. I just want to let everybody know too, in New Brunswick, we now are officially 10,000 people without power. And I just want to refresh my page here in PEI, not to forget about you. Yeah, we're only seeing one power outage in PEI at the moment. And you know what, Rhythm, there has been a lot of comment online that the audience wants us to talk about PEI a little bit more.
Yeah.
So let's just look. You can see over towards Summerside, the rain is really heavy right now coming down through that region.
Yeah, so the rain, as this is turning around that kind of center, we're starting to see that rain shift from Charlottetown towards that eastern end, rather western end of PEI. And then when we are taking a look at the rain accumulations just over the last 3 hours, it hasn't been too heavy in through areas of Charlottetown just yet, just crossing maybe those 5 millimeters. But when we are taking, let's take a look at the wind speeds as well. Still sitting around that 42 kilometers an hour. But as we are going to go through the day today, we are going to see those winds really pick up as the system moves more inland, crossing those 85, possibly 80 to 84 kilometers an hour in through that evening period for Charlottetown. But the rainfall totals will be significantly less compared to what we're going to be seeing in other places. However, those rainfall totals will still be crossing close to those 20 to 30 millimeters through areas of through PEI.
Awesome. And I just want to update people, you know, we're getting some of the latest numbers in terms of the wind. Peggy's Cove, 83 kilometers an hour. We saw that with Nate, 93 kilometers an hour in a place like Halifax. Next message that we got from YouTube. Oh, I just lost. Oh, here it is. So is a downpour of rain coming from the Gulf of Maine in towards the Bay of Fundy? Is it being picked up by the storm and then dumped on land? So that's an interesting question because, of course, we know when the center of this storm and the structure of this storm is over the Atlantic, it definitely adds more fuel. It's tapping into its moisture source, right? So can that lead to more rainfall, let's say, as it makes its first entrance onto land?
So when we are taking a look at these storms, it's going to be all that moisture that it has picked up from the Gulf as it's gotten stronger, as it's grabbed so much moisture. And as it continues to move through the Maritimes, that's when it's allowed to basically dump it out because we have so much convection in through the area. So that's why we will have those heavy downpours in through areas of the Maritimes.
All right. Now let's take a look at the rainfall as a whole and just update the audience on that in terms of where we're seeing that heavier swath of rain moving in. You know, easy to say rainfall warnings are issued widespread because of this.
Yeah, so those heavier swaths of rain right now are going to be in through areas of southern Nova Scotia as well as pushing through areas of Miramichi, so that northwestern end of New Brunswick. Now, when we are taking a look at those total rainfall, or rather, let's take a look at the last 3 hours of rain. We've gotten quite a bit of rain in through that southern end of New Brunswick as well as Nova Scotia, and we're going to continue to see these areas accumulate that rain as this system continues to move through the day today, as well as a little bit into tomorrow, with those really big widespread rain events happening with the winds, the rains going from 50 to up to 100 millimeters.
Now let's go back to the winds because the winds, I think, are really starting to pick up now. It is currently 9:01 a.m. in Atlantic Canada, 8:01 a.m. in places like Ontario and Quebec. The wind speeds are starting to sort of get close to that 100-kilometer mark. Do you think there's any potential of reaching that 110, 120?
So reaching the 110, 120, is going to be a little bit interesting. So we are still looking at the center of the storm being close to that 120 kilometers an hour. But when we're talking more inland, it is more about that wraparound of the winds that are going to be producing winds close to 100, which is possible for areas through Halifax. However, not just yet. As we go in towards that afternoon period, Halifax can be seeing winds close to 98 kilometers, but nothing over that to worry about.
Okay. Now, a lot of the times when we get a storm heading into Atlantic Canada, especially when it's making this big of an impact into places like New Brunswick, we can feel the effects of it up and down the St. Lawrence, the eastern townships, and into Quebec. So I'm just curious, Rhythm, what kind of impact are we going to communicate to people, let's say in Quebec City or Montreal today? Will they be feeling the effects of Lee?
So the effects of Lee will not be as big of an impact in through areas of Halifax, not Halifax, but through Quebec. But that cloud cover is definitely going to stick around in through areas of Montreal up towards Quebec. And when we are going to see, that is my apologies for that.
That's okay.
But what we are going to see is a little bit of rain moving inland towards those eastern townships. However, nothing too heavy or anything big to worry about, mainly that cloud cover.
Yeah, so we're not going to be getting those heavy bands of rain in places like Montreal or Mont Tremblant. So keep that in mind if you do have any weekend plans that are taking you out this way. Or maybe you live in northern New Brunswick and you think, I don't really want to bear out this storm, and you head to a place like Montreal, maybe just a bit of cloud cover for you. Now, Rhythm, I want to bring our audience in and show them this live shot here of Peggy's Cove. Just a mesmerizing, incredible scene. You know, sometimes when you want to watch something, but you don't really want to pay attention to it. You just want something on in the background. A lot of people actually put the Weather Network on for that exact reason. Yeah, they just want it on. But, you know, a scene like this, I could totally just have that on my TV to just watch and enjoy something like that, because it really does feel a bit mesmerizing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I would honestly just keep this on just to see how high I can count those waves to get.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we had another question from Elizabeth Robinson. She wants us to chat about Miramichi again. She says, my relatives are there in a forested area and they've had rainfall all summer. How bad will the wind be? Of course, many people are worried about trees. And Rhythm, you know, I have friends who live in Bedford, and they talk about, you know, you look at the trees on your property and every year you think, okay, we probably should cut them down. We probably should make this situation a little bit safer. And now you get into this and the wind is coming in, the ground is so saturated, it definitely could be dangerous. Just want to say welcome back to the TV audience. Just asked Rhythm a question about Miramichi and you know, the intensity and the possibility of the saturated ground meeting up with the strong winds and trees coming down.
So yeah, you said it perfectly. So since we've already had quite a bit of rain in through areas of northern New Brunswick, with these winds, we can expect those tree branches to fall as well. And also possibly the ground, since it is saturated with more rain that we are going to expect in through the area, can expect some of those trees to become loosened off of the ground, the roots to fall and the trees to fall over. When it does come towards that total amount of rain in through areas of Miramichi, can see those up towards those 50 to even 60 millimeters of rain. So it's going to be quite a wet event, and it's really going to depend on how wet the ground gets and how strong those roots are for a lot of the trees.
Absolutely, even close to that 100 millimeter mark. All right, we want to bring Nathan Coleman back so our TV audience can witness the magic of Peggy's Cove. You know, there was so much messaging yesterday, Rhythm, from every press conference I watched. They said it is not worth it. Nothing good will come from going down to the shores to witness the swells in a place like Peggy's Cove. And Nathan Coleman is certainly going to demonstrate why. Nate, good morning. I just want to give you an update in Nova Scotia. We officially now have 100,000 without power, and the latest in New Brunswick, almost 13,000 without power.
Well, that is incredible, and I do hope that everyone is remaining safe out here. I've seen something I've just never seen before. The height of the wave came in so large that it surrounded the lighthouse here at Peggy's Cove, and I've never seen it. Water flowing down in the front of the lighthouse quite like that. It's since gone down into the ocean. I can see a little otter just crawling along the rocks there, wondering where to go. But But yes, just incredible. I'm not surprised by those amounts in terms of power outages, 100,000, because it is just, the wind has been so strong and so persistent as well. It's just high sustained winds here. We've had a gust over 80 here, but it feels like it's just non-stop. And so we're out here, we're holding on. The restaurant here is closed for the day, of course, but the owner is still on hand. He's watching his property, and he just brought out a coffee for myself and our camera operator Dave Hodge. So I want to give a shout out to him because he's standing there with coffee. I'll come up and grab it up here because I think I need one now.
Yeah, Nate, you would go and drink that coffee. You absolutely need it. The National Hurricane Center, just as of 8 a.m., their update in terms of Lee, there has been no change. If you're just joining us, Lee is no longer a hurricane. It was downgraded officially at 5 a.m. to a post-tropical storm. Now, the downgrade, I guess, for some people may help them breathe a sigh of relief. But in reality, this storm can still pack a major punch like a hurricane, depending on where you are, what you're experiencing. You know, when we saw these catastrophic floods back in places like Halifax through July and August, those flooding events will bring more rainfall than what we'll see with Lee. So it really just depends, you know, what kind of weather happens in your backyard and the impacts you can feel.
Yeah, but we still have those winds that are about a category 1. Just because we don't have that structure anymore, that's why it's a post-tropical cyclone. But wherever you are, there's areas that those winds can still be around that 100 to 130 kilometers an hour, yet a very slow-moving system at that.
Yeah, and the slow-moving nature of the storm is really what creates the issue because it has a lot of moisture with it. We were talking about that PWAT, the precipitable water, essentially the ability for this storm to rain, and that ability is high.
It is very high, especially through that northwesterly area that this is going to cross over. So in through areas of St. John's, Fredericton are going to be seeing those heavier amounts of rainfall. Once again, just repeating and reiterating, the amount of rainfall that can be expected can be over 100 millimeters in some areas.
All right, now we're getting a lot of questions about high tide. Can we talk a little bit about high tide and how that can pair with storm surge and, of course, the winds and the swells? We often talk about how storm surge can be the deadliest part of this storm, and we look at a place like Atlantic Canada where tides are constantly changing and people are often dealing with different water levels.
Exactly. So with this system, since we do have those strong winds, we are going to expect those tides to get higher and that storm surge to be significantly higher as well. When we're taking a look specifically at what Halifax, areas near Halifax are looking for in terms of the wave height, we've gotten up to 6.9 meters.
Wow.
Just about, I think 20 minutes ago, we were just around 6.1. So they are rapidly increasing and they're going to continue to increase. And those tides, well, when it does come to the storm surge, it's not going to be too big of a heavy event, but yeah, you can still have storm surges that are over a meter.
And we do know that coming up at about 9:50 this morning, that's when Peggy's Cove does experience their highest tide of the morning. So that is coinciding with when some of these strongest winds will be coming through. So it really just adds to that dramatic level of some of those waves that will be moving into the region. And it really does help to highlight why you should not head down to a place like Peggy's Cove today. This was the scene from earlier this morning. People were still, I guess, a little ambitious to go and look at what the Atlantic Ocean was doing as Lee moves into Atlantic Canada. For people in Atlantic Canada, you know, maybe this is the first time you're experiencing a hurricane in this region. We know that over the last 3 years, a lot of the Ontario population has moved to Atlantic Canada. So for some people, yeah, maybe this is your big first storm, but still, it is never worth it. Nothing good can ever come of going down to the shorelines and experiencing a wave that maybe you anticipated to be small and it was not. Now, Rhythm, I just want to mention 62% of flights canceled today at the Halifax airport. The Halifax airport, it is about a 40-minute drive north from the waterfront, so protected a little more from these very strong wind gusts, let's say, but still, oh, look at that, we're over 100 kilometers an hour now, Halifax International. So I take that back, not that protected. That certainly is a good reason to cancel some flights today.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone would want to fly in that.
No way, no way. Okay, as we look at some of these wind gusts, Rhythm, we often talked about the center of the storm. You know, some people call it the eye of the hurricane. No longer seeing that structure, no longer seeing that hurricane status. But let's go through the center of the storm and why that is so significant, essentially, as we go over the next 3 hours.
Yeah, so when we are taking a look just at a view over the last 2 hours, we can kind of tell the center of this storm is right around this area, this warm core right here. Now, the reason that it's so significant is because that is where you're going to have that deep convection of the system right around it, bringing those heavy downpours and just around it those strong winds as well. So when we're taking a look at the winds as it enters through areas of Yarmouth as well as St. John's, it may look a little bit weaker, but just around it, what we would call something like the eye wall would have those heavier downpours, stronger winds, and just more activity in general.
And you can see that wind field really moving over top of Prince Edward Island, a place like Charlottetown, a beautiful waterfront, a busy downtown through that region. To see wind gusts 85, 87 kilometers an hour as we go through this afternoon and overnight, that could really create some damage through this region.
Absolutely. And with those winds as well as the foliage on the trees, we're looking at possibly trees coming down as well.
Absolutely. Now, something that I want to talk about, there's been a couple tweets and some chatter on Twitter about this. The fact that Lee is no longer a hurricane doesn't mean that this storm is going to bring less intensity into your backyard.
Absolutely not. Not by any means.
So I think that it's important for us to talk about that. This storm was not downgraded. It was just reclassified.
Yes, it's reclassified to a post-tropical system. Now with this, we still have those strong winds. So we're still looking at those 100-kilometer-per-hour winds in through areas of, well, International Airport Halifax right now. But that's still going to continue. It's just the structure of it has changed significantly where it's no longer a hurricane type of system.
Awesome. That was a great explanation, Rhythm. And I think that's just really important to remember that this storm can really have a major impact into your backyard. The fact that it's no longer a hurricane, it just changes the way that we communicate our messaging to you. And it really just, you know, changes our banners that we use online and the wording that we use. But a post-tropical storm heading into Atlantic Canada with sustained wind gusts of 130 kilometers an hour, with rainfall that could lead over 100 millimeters, wind gusts that will be catastrophic through the region. It really is going to pack a massive punch. We're already seeing all flights canceled at Halifax. That was just the latest update from Halifax International, and those wind gusts over 105 kilometers an hour. That can bring some really, really big damage. And I just want to welcome the TV audience back into the picture too. And, you know, for people on the live stream, I know you just heard us talk about this, but I just want to reiterate it again one more time for the TV audience who's just joining us. The fact that Lee is no longer a hurricane, it doesn't mean the system has been downgraded. It just means it's been reclassified. It's changed a lot of its structure. It's lost that hurricane sort of formation. It doesn't have an eye of a storm. We're not going to be saying this storm officially made landfall, X, Y, Z. But it still has huge impacts into Atlantic Canada.
Absolutely, and we don't want to be saying it's a hurricane when it's not, because that's misinformation on our end. You can still have those strong winds that come with possibly a Category 1 hurricane, but the structure of it, again, is gone. We still have that center of the storm, but there's so much more dry air that is being infiltrated as well as cold air that it's just weakened quite a bit.
Awesome. Okay, Rhythm, let's pull up some webcams because I want to show our audience who's joining us on TV right now just some of the images about what we have been seeing around Atlantic Canada. You can see this was earlier this morning in Yarmouth, some really heavy rainfall. A lot of people have been asking us on YouTube, what's the risk for some flooding on the streets in Yarmouth? Well, I think this video kind of answers it for you. It is currently happening now, and remember that heavy rainfall is going to be continuing as we go throughout the morning. The winds continuously picking up over the next 3 hours. As we take you to some of the live webcams, Rhythm, let's take a look at a place like the Halifax waterfront, a look at the pier, and you can just see how intensely rainy some of these areas are and how much the swells have picked up. You know, when you look at an image like this, it's so easy to say, oh, that doesn't look that bad. But if you were standing right down there, that's bad.
Yeah, and the wind and the rain, everything blowing at you all at once, that's not a fun place to be at all.
Absolutely. Peggy's Cove has been a place that Nathan Coleman has been joining us at. I want to see if we can get Nathan Coleman to come back into the live stream. And we just have about 2 more minutes left on the channel here. I want to show the audience what Nathan Coleman has been experiencing in Peggy's Cove. Oh, actually, I'll show you this shot here. This is a oh wow, that was a massive wave. Huge wave. Can we bring that up so the TV audience can see this? This is a live shot of Peggy's Cove in Atlantic, Canada right now. It is 9:16 a.m. You can just see how strong and intense some of these swells are. The wind gusts in Peggy's Cove, the last reading we had was about 83 kilometers an hour. Oh, it looks like Nathan Coleman, he's walking down. He's bracing for this again. Nate, good morning to you. We love checking in with you. Oh, you got your coffee in hand. Have you eaten anything this morning? That's my next question.
No, not too much. I had breakfast before I left the house, but John, who's the owner of the Southwestern restaurant here, came out, gave us coffees, and there's no power here, of course. And he said, you know, if you guys need sandwiches, just come on in. You know, it's so hospitable. So thank you, John. And he's been here, you know, since he was 4 years old, and saying this is only the 3rd time that he's seen that water rush down in front of the lighthouse as it did, you know, moments ago. I just took a still photo as well of another big wave coming in, and it looked like it was almost the same height as the lighthouse in behind. So massive waves crashing in here, massive swells, and so we're going to take a look at the Cove as well. And you know, he's advising people, you know, don't come down. The parking lot is closed here, and it's just incredible to see the force of nature out here, but we are remaining safe, staying on the deck here, and staying sheltered. But you know, those power outages just continue to climb. There are some reports of, you know, branches and trees down on the road back here, so we're going to have a little bit of a difficult time navigating our way back when we do leave the Peggy's Cove area. So my best advice to you is to stay off the roads and give municipal crews time to clear them when you venture out, because you don't want to get stuck.
Absolutely, Nate. Nate, thank you so much for showcasing some of those scenes. I want to ask you though, it almost looks like it's a bit bright behind you. Is that just a bit of the iris on the camera, or is it actually a little bright?
No, it is bright. It is bright. We've seen dark clouds. Like earlier, it was a little darker, but a large dark cloud pass us, and one side of it, you can see the opposite side of it, where it is quite bright. It's almost like the sun wants to break through the clouds here. I'm not sure how quickly that would happen, but yeah, it gives you a good view of these waves for sure.
Awesome, and I just want to remind the audience that Peggy's Cove is closed to the public. This is not a place to go down and get Nathan Coleman's autograph today. He will not be signing autographs. This is not a place to go and meet Nathan Coleman. Maybe we can set something else up when it's brighter and sunnier. A meet Nathan Coleman down by Peggy's Cove kind of day. Nate, what do you think? You up for something like that?
I'm down for the meet and greet.
I might fly down to meet Nathan.
You got lots of fans, Nate. Yeah, okay, I just want to give everyone an update on some of the power outages here. We are officially at 112,000 people without power in Nova Scotia. Some of the highest concentration is really between Metro Halifax and Lunenburg. We're also looking now at 15,000 people without power in New Brunswick, and in PEI still just 1 case of a power outage. So Rhythm, let's take a look at the radar. We know our audience at the Weather Network loves just the radar, the size of the storm, where the heaviest rain is falling. So can you walk us through some of those parts of it right now?
Absolutely.
Can we zoom out just a little bit? Absolutely. Just so we can see sort of the bigger picture and then get closer? I don't know, for me, whenever I'm looking at the radar, I kind of gotta get my footing and then get into it.
You want to see where it's moving and where it's kind of going.
There we go.
So
okay,
there we go.
Perfect.
So as we play this out, we're going to see as that system is rolling around. Just around in through Nova Scotia, zoom back in for folks, and we're seeing those heavier bursts of rain in through areas of Bathurst and Miramichi up top. We are getting a little bit of a break just north of Halifax from the rain. However, don't expect it to be too long, because as those bands are going to continue to move around, it's going to bring more rain in through those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as we take a look at the winds, some of those wind speeds, 105 kilometers an hour in Halifax, we have seen tons. I think the official number is all departures and arrivals have been canceled for the early morning in Halifax at Stanfield. We're looking at 105 at the airport. These wind gusts are really starting to pick up. And Rhythm, if you could sort of give a general estimate on time, when do you think the strongest winds would be, let's say from that stretch of Yarmouth to Halifax?
Just in between that stretch, we are already getting winds that are so high, but as that center continues to move, and we were talking a lot about that center of the system making its way inland, it's going to really pick up a lot of those winds in through that Halifax area, in across the afternoon into the early evening periods.
Okay, now let's take a look at the band of rain that's moving in. I know we've been talking about this a lot on air this morning, but the audience on YouTube, we love your questions, we love the comments. So many of this general theme is, where is that heavy rainfall going to fall? Will it affect in terms of high tide, especially along the Bay of Fundy? We look at the Petitcodiac River too, St. John in through Fredericton. What are some of your thoughts on when the heaviest rainfall will be there?
Well, the heaviest rainfall, like I mentioned before, is going to be as that center moves more inland, so the center of this storm. We can take a look at this precipitation map, and we see a lot of that heavier bands in through areas of Yarmouth, stretching all the way up to Fredericton, are going to be impacting those areas around that afternoon to early evening period, and then continuing to move in that northwesterly direction as we head through into the overnight as well.
All right, now Rhythm, a question that we haven't talked about yet on this live stream this morning. When is this going to be over? When will people in Halifax say, okay, Lee is done, Lee has moved on? That, I'm sure, is a question on a lot of people's minds.
Absolutely. So when we are taking a look at Lee, it is, again, post-tropical, and it's going to continue to deteriorate at a quite fast rate. When we are taking a look in through areas of the Maritimes, it is looking like early tomorrow morning it's going to pass. However, some of those remnants are going to be moving in towards Newfoundland as we head into Sunday.
Okay, so Sunday will be a calmer day as the kids go back to school Monday morning. You think people in Fredericton, Halifax, of course there might be a lot of cleanup to do, but in terms of the weather, what do you think it's looking like on Monday? Mainly clear?
Mainly clear. Some cloud cover is still going to stick around for Monday. However, it is looking to be mainly clear as we go through the day. Actually completely clear as we go through the day. Nice. A little bit of instability still behind it with some cloud cover, but mainly clear.
Okay. Now, as we talk about Newfoundland, Newfoundland is going to see the effects of this storm. We're going to get to that in a second. First, I just want to show you what some of the shoreline conditions around Halifax have been looking like. We had this video sent to us earlier this morning. You can see Halifax not looking too pretty. That's a dangerous place to park your car. I can just see the nose of that car to the right side of the screen. I definitely wouldn't want to be there. Some of the wave heights off the coast of Halifax have been recorded on a buoy at almost 12 meters high. Closer to the pier, now about 6 meters. Actually, we're almost 7 meters now at the pier. So the waves getting extremely dangerous. Just want to welcome the TV audience back into the live stream as we continue to follow this storm for you. No longer a hurricane, but still packing the impacts of one. That really is the main message as some of these wind gusts are over 100 kilometers an hour. Now, Rhythm, I just asked you if we could talk a bit about Newfoundland. So let's focus on Newfoundland. And, you know, Newfoundland for the rainfall, for some of the strong wind gusts. I think that's going to be more of a Sunday story that we can focus on, but just getting folks prepared in this area.
Yeah, so Newfoundland is not going to be hit with any of those stronger impacts. We're looking at that widespread rain coming in through those areas as we head towards the afternoon, as that system does hook towards the right and towards that western end of Newfoundland, looking at that widespread rain. And when it does come to those rainfall totals associated with this system, it is not going to be again as heavy as what the Maritimes are going to expect, but still those 30 to 50 millimeters are still expected.
Still a stormy day in Newfoundland and a day where you got to get the storm chips ready, right?
Absolutely. I love me some storm chips just because it's comforting.
What flavors are your storm chips?
Oh, just plain.
Plain?
Salt.
With a with dip?
No.
Just plain.
Just plain and like a can of pop next to me, and I'm good to go.
And you can watch the storm. Of course, we know folks in Atlantic Canada have been preparing for this. We have seen so much preparation go into this with Nova Scotia Power for days on end preparing for the storm. These wind gusts now coming in will be the strongest over the next 3 hours. The heavier rainfall, that's really going to start to ramp up as we go into the afternoon across New Brunswick. And Rhythm, let's just show the audience here a swath of that heavy rainfall moving into New Brunswick, because this is going to be the target for some of the worst weather that we will see in terms of the heavy precipitation.
Yeah, so that northwesterly kind of direction that this system is going to take, so in through areas of St. John's, Fredericton, all the way up to Bathurst is where they're going to see those heavy swaths. Even though on satellite it may look like, okay, it's kind of passing, it's not that heavy, it's going to come right back around as it keeps rotating in that counterclockwise direction.
And what do you think the potential is for some embedded thunderstorms?
So there may be a potential for some embedded thunderstorms, how maybe a rumble or two, but there's just not enough energy in the atmosphere to promote that.
But there is enough precipitable water with this.
Oh, there's a lot of precipitable water with this.
All right, let's bring Nathan Coleman back into the picture. Nate, the TV audience is with us right now. Just talk a little bit about how you're almost seeing a bit of this brighter patch come into Peggy's Cove, but the winds have been just outstanding. My latest reading was 83 kilometers. I think that's grown now.
Yes, it's definitely felt stronger than that, and yes, like you mentioned, it is quite bright here. You expect it to be, completely dark and stormy, but we are getting a bit of the sun breaking through at points. But the wind has continued to really be sustained. It's felt over 80. I know that was our last reading was the 83, but we'll have to check that one again. And I'm seeing some reports as well in the Eastern Passage area of Halifax that there has been, some massive waves crashing in along there, and some potential for localized flooding with the storm surge threat in the Cove there in Eastern Passage. And you'll also want to be cautious, especially along Lawrencetown Beach, with the potential for rocks being pushed up along the road there. That typically happens when we get storms like this, and so you can pretty much guarantee we'll see some of those impacts as well today, because you can just feel the strength of the wind here. I mean, it is just incredible. When I step out from the sheltered area, I feel like this jacket's almost like a sail. You can see it flapping.
And I know that feeling, Nate, when you get too much wind sort of trapped in your jacket, you can't push it down. That's exactly what's happening to your hood right now. Nate, I just want to update the audience while you're with us here. 123,000 people without power right now in Nova Scotia. In New Brunswick, we're 15,000 without power. When we look, at the geography of Nova Scotia, down to places like Liverpool, Sable River, Lockport, Shelburne, the Barrington Passage, Clark's Harbour, these are regions that will see some very intense weather close to Yarmouth, that will see that center of the storm come through. And Nate, when we talk about the center of the storm, that is where some of those strongest winds will be. So what you're experiencing right now is really just the start of this weather.
Yes, that's exactly the point. I mean, this isn't, the peak of the storm where it's going to move over soon. We've only just begun. So certainly I hope you heeded the warnings and definitely tied everything down. I know all along the South Shore there, many fishing communities, so there are seawalls that have been built to help keep the boats and those kind of marine assets safe. But still, you don't want to venture out and take a peek at this, because it's only getting worse in terms of those winds ramping up with Lee's arrival. It's post-tropical, but that doesn't mean we couldn't see winds gusting, over 120. That's still a potential here.
Absolutely. Now, Nate, you're doing a really good job of actually being able to hear me, because quite often when the winds are gusting that strong, you just have the little earbuds in. It's hard to even hear the person in the control room, in the newsroom. So I'm glad you can still hear. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about how this storm is different than Fiona, because of course there has been multiple storms over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years that have created a massive impact in Atlantic Canada, and that's just sort of in our close memory. So how is this different from Fiona?
Well, it's a different area that's being impacted. Of course, when Fiona tracked through, we really saw those strong winds coming onshore on the North Shore and on PEI as well. And then there was the big issue when the storm surge was all brought ashore in southwestern Newfoundland, in the Port of Bass area especially, when all the water funneled up there. It happened at high tide, and over 100 buildings were condemned there. That is not the path of Lee. Lee is a weaker storm. It may not feel like it at the moment, but it's different areas being impacted. Yarmouth was mostly spared from Fiona, so now they're taking their big hit from this. So it's a different area, and we're hopeful that it won't be quite as much damage as Fiona, because Fiona lingered for so long, and it set the record for that minimal pressure. So extreme winds with Fiona. These winds are strong, and they have caused over 100,000 power outages, of course, but we're hoping we don't reach that 400,000 power outage level that we saw during Fiona.
Absolutely. And Nate, just to go off that right now, 122,000 without power right now across Nova Scotia, over 15,000 without power in New Brunswick. And Nate, we're just getting the latest from Halifax right now. The storm surge is almost about a meter. So we know that those water levels will continue to rise. As someone who knows Halifax incredibly well, what is your advice to anyone who wants to venture down to that waterfront today?
Yes, I would definitely not recommend it. I would stay away from the waterfront. We're approaching high tide here at Peggy's Cove as well, and that's why we're seeing, these incredible waves here. And the fishermen here are concerned about the fishing sheds being flooded, but they're kind of used to it. But down on the Halifax waterfront, you have, so many businesses, and in the past, we have seen some flooding at the lower deck, which is a popular pub right on the waterfront, but the water rushes up, and it can come up over the boardwalk, and definitely not safe to be in there, because as well as the threat of falling into the water with these strong winds, there's lots of debris in and around the city that could be flying off buildings as well. So best to shelter inside until this storm passes.
Absolutely. Okay, Nate, I'm just going to take a break for 1 second, but stay right there, because our TV audience is coming back in just about 45 seconds, and I definitely want to give them a preview of what Peggy's Cove is looking like. So I'm going to be back to Nate in just 1 minute. I just want to mention that the tide will start going out in Halifax, so that will offset the surge a little bit. But for now, what we do know is some of these wave heights, wow, we're getting over 10 meters now, close to 11.
Yep.
That buoy off the coast of Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. And what about Halifax?
Well, Halifax, getting close to 7 meters right now, which is very high.
Yeah, and what about wind gust rhythm? Do we have that graphic available that we can just show some of those current wind gusts? I know Halifax Airport, so we're still at 105 for that peak.
Yeah.
All right, let's bring Nathan Coleman back into the picture. Nate, our TV audience is going to be joining us in just about a second, and I just want to showcase some of the intense weather that you're experiencing down in Peggy's Cove. Do you think maybe you could go down for a little walk and show them just what some of those waves are looking like behind you? And I do want to remind everybody, Peggy's Cove is officially closed today. Nathan Coleman, he's an expert. He has all the safety guides and training. That's why he is there. But to the general public, Peggy's Cove is closed.
Yes, I'll take a walk down here. I'm just going to mention, you may lose my audio. I'm keeping my back to the wind, so you can hear me through the microphone, but if I turn around, you'll just hear that wind. But I'll take a stroll down here. This is the new observation deck, which is quite incredible. It's very accessible. On a sunny day, you can come out and take in that view of Peggy's Cove. And here we are. I'll give you a look at these waves, because you don't see it like this every day, especially with the wind direction, to have them coming over the front of the lighthouse when a big one crashes in. And it's almost like these new little waterfalls are formed, because the waves come up and they trickle down the other side. But yeah, I've never seen, the potential for Peggy's Cove lighthouse to be surrounded by water. But that's some of the imagery we've been looking at here, with these strong waves coming in. And Yeah, you can feel the wind, you can feel the fury of nature right here, but you want to step back. The parking lot is closed. You can watch through our lens today because it is quite dangerous out here if you got any closer than this deck.
Nate, amazing job. Thank you so much for telling the story of what's going on at Peggy's Cove. And you know, that is just one small, tiny aspect of this storm. Lee is a massive storm. It is no longer a hurricane. It now officially is called a post-tropical storm. And the size of it is huge. So let's go over sort of the widespread impacts of this system.
So I want to first go over the sun rising on how big this system is.
We got the satellite imagery now. Nice.
So as we take a look at the satellite imagery, it's going to show you how widespread this system really is, impacting all of northeastern end of the state, as well as just through the Maritimes, really seeing that cloud cover even up towards Newfoundland at this point. And when we're taking a look at how big it is, we still have those impacts of the strong winds, as well as it moving really, really slowly. So we're going to see this cloud cover for a while. However, when we are taking a look at the long-term impacts, so the rain accumulation, let's take a look at the last 24 hours, or rather the last 3 hours to begin with. Some of those heavier rain bands really in through areas of up towards Bathurst, as well as heading towards St. John's as well. Now, of course, this system is going to continue to move in this counterclockwise rotation. So sometimes even where Nathan was, it kind of looked like there was a little bit of a break coming in terms of the cloud. And that's just that first little band moving across the area. But it is going to come back around with rain accumulations in through areas of Yarmouth all the way through to Miramichi, up towards those 50 to 100 millimeters.
And when it comes to wind gusts, Halifax International Airport, 117 kilometers an hour. That is the latest when it comes to those extremely strong winds. So no doubt we have seen all flights canceled as of this early morning. Another question we're getting on YouTube, Rhythm, is so this is not the worst, right? Is there more to come? Is there more wind to come? So I guess it really depends on where you are. Let's talk about some of the areas that will see the strongest wind gusts. Yeah,
so the strongest wind gusts right now are looking through areas of Halifax, just on that eastern end as it wraps around this system. Now, we are going to see those wind gusts continue to increase in through areas of Halifax, even up to PEI can be seeing those above 80 kilometer-hour winds as we head towards the afternoon and early evening periods as the center of this system moves more inland into the Maritimes.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important to not forget how strong the winds are going to be for PEI, because we tend to be really focused on the fact that Halifax down through Yarmouth up to Digby and then the Fundy Shores, how this zone is really a key zone for power outages for those wind gusts over 70 kilometers an hour, even over 100 kilometers an hour. But across PEI, 80, 84 for Charlottetown, that is going to bring some damage.
Absolutely, and we still have so much foliage, and we've talked about this. The trees are still standing strong, and also just the power lines in general.
Okay, this is a question on YouTube. I do not know the answer to this. Rhythm, I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this either, but we will do some Googling. We're going to get the answer. This is an interesting one. If the power is out at Peggy's Cove, what is powering the lighthouse? I'm going to say they must have a generator.
I would assume so. I'm not too sure myself.
Elizabeth Robinson, I am going to Google that because that is actually a very good question. And if we get Nathan Coleman back, maybe I can ask him that too. Or he's not going to be able to Google with that wind and that rain. So. I'm going to Google it for Nate, and we're going to get you that update. Or maybe some of our producers behind the scene can Google that for us too. Make sure it's a reliable source. Now, as we take a look at some of the rainfall, let's move back into the rain. That heavy swath of rain coming through. And Rhythm, I think it's important the mention that you made on how this system is moving through in a couple different bands. So if you experience, like, for example, we look at the radar right now, and that's some really heavy rain coming into the south of Maine, for example. Yeah. This is not the first of it and then it's done. We're seeing multiple rounds of this.
Yeah, this system's going to continue to move round and round as it does with any type of a tropical storm or a hurricane. And we're going to see multiple rounds of this. continue to move through. Just taking a look at the track of this system as well. We are just sitting right off the shores of Nova Scotia right now. As we hit 2 p.m., we're going to continue to see this move inland, and it's still going to bring more rain with it and more of those strong winds continuing all the way up until tomorrow. But it is going to start to deteriorate quite quickly.
Now, for anyone who's just tuning in, an important aspect that we were talking about when it comes to this storm that may relieve some anxiety for some, let's talk about when people in Halifax will see this storm pass. When will the worst of the winds be over? When will the rainfall be done? What will it look like on Monday as you go back to work and school?
So we're going to take a look at the winds first. We're going to continue to monitor the winds in through Halifax because they are projected to get even faster. As we hit that afternoon period, we can see those 90 kilometers per hour winds continuing. And as the system continues to move through Saturday, again, quite slow moving in nature, we're still going to expect those strong winds in through the overnight 4 PEI, and then just having this right hook thanks to a trough just towards the west of us is going to be impacting areas through Newfoundland as we head towards Sunday. But when we're taking a look at the forecast in through areas of the Maritimes, especially Monday, I know a lot of people don't like rain. I'm one of them. We are going to see a bit of a clear out in terms of the cloud cover as well as we head towards later on Sunday in through areas of the Maritimes, and then just a little bit of cloud cover moving back in, but no rain.
All right, Rhythm, we love our audience here at the Weather Network, and it always is such a joy and a pleasure when you connect with us, when you share your weather story with us. I know we've had a lot of video come into our newsroom this morning of people just trying to communicate with us what Lee is looking like in your backyard. So we have some live webcams, but I know we also have a lot of footage and a lot of video that has come into our newsroom, and I would love to share some of that on our channel with you right now and through this live stream. You can see what the rainfall was looking like in Mahone Bay in Nova Scotia. Karen, we thank you for connecting with us, for showcasing this. I don't think anyone wanting to be heading down that dock, heading out on a boat today. Today is a day for Scrabble. Scrabble on the waterfront on a rainy day.
I'm a Monopoly girl.
Are you Monopoly?
Yeah.
Okay, I would play Monopoly with you, but Scrabble is definitely going to be my top choice. Blue Rock, Nova Scotia, you can see just how misty it is out there, and the water's starting to really whip up. The latest we had when it comes to storm surge, by the way, in Halifax was almost a meter, but we know the tide is about to go down. Christopher Curtis on YouTube saying, can we get an update on Nate? Is Nate safe? Yes, Nathan Coleman is safe. If we can we bring Nathan Coleman back into the conversation just to showcase what some of the images are looking like down in Peggy's Cove? The last reading we had on wind gusts in Peggy's Cove was 83 kilometers an hour, but I do want to ask some of our producers behind the scenes if we can get a newer reading on the wind gust when it comes to Peggy's Cove. That would be awesome. Halifax, this is the latest reading here, 117 kilometers an hour. That is some powerful wind.
That is, and if Halifax is up to 117, Peggy's Cove is probably right up there with it.
Yeah, probably. Stuart Crawford is saying, what about Moncton? There hasn't been much chat about Moncton. What is that forecast? So we're going to work on getting Nate. Christopher Curtis, I can promise you Nate is safe. We're going to get him back in the stream in a second. But let's talk a little bit about Moncton, because Moncton is, of course, a spot that isn't right on the Fundy shores, but close, and it is in the crosshairs for some heavy rain.
Absolutely. So Moncton is still going to be getting up towards those 50 to 75 millimeters of rain as that system moves through. Now, it won't be getting, let's say, what we're calling the center of the storm hit it, but since it's right in those crosshairs right on the side, it is still going to get those heavy rainfall totals as well as those strong winds. The winds can be up towards those close to those 80 kilometers an hour at some times, but looking like it's going to miss some of those stronger hit.
Now, in terms of rain being done for a place like Moncton, when do you think that would happen? Into Sunday morning?
Probably most likely into Sunday morning. So when we're taking a look at this rain as the system moves through, again, widespread rain for all of today. And as we head through the overnight period into Sunday morning, that's when we're going to see a little bit of a break as it shifts towards the north. So Moncton, you will be looking at a nice day as we head towards Sunday.
And I like this snapshot right here. This is showing you Sunday, 1 p.m. Atlantic time. Charlottetown with this model still into some of the showers. Western edge Cape Breton Island still into some of those showers. That heavier rain moving into Labrador, and then that western edge of Newfoundland, certainly still seeing some of that rain. All right, Nathan Coleman. Oh, look at those Muskoka chairs. Nate, oh my goodness, they are all piled up. They don't want to get blown away. Our TV audience is back. Thank you so much for joining us. Perfect timing because we are getting out now to Nathan Coleman. Nate, we had Christopher Curtis on Twitter. He just wanted an update to make sure you were safe.
Yes, definitely. Well, we just had to take a bit of a break there because our batteries were dying. We have the camera battery and we have our Dejero battery. So we've been broadcasting live over an hour. So just had to do a switch up. And I just wanted to show you these Muskoka chairs. Of course, Muskoka, popular area, and their chairs are famous. But here they had to take them all down. I'm in a bit, the wind is still blowing as strong as you saw me last time, but I'm in a sheltered area in front of the restaurant here. And this is where they piled them up. They're all tied together because you don't want to see those flying everywhere. That would hurt. And so, you know, they've secured everything here. There's a security guard on hand who's warning people coming along. There's been a few photographers coming to get some shots of the waves because I just posted one on my Twitter where you can almost see it going over top of the lighthouse. That's how high the waves are. So that's a rare occasion here as we hunker down. I know there's been many power outages, no power here as well, and over 100,000 across Nova Scotia, the customers without power. So crews will be on standby, but they have to wait for those winds to get lower than 80 kilometers per hour before they can get up in the buckets to make the repairs. So that's why we always say prepare for 72 hours without power, because even if it's an easy fix, if a road is blocked off due to downed trees, it will take the trucks time to get out there. So I hope you prepared, and I'm hoping you're enjoying the fact I'm out here so you don't have to be, but I'm staying incredibly safe with my camera operator, Dave Hodge, who's doing just a great job.
Awesome, Nate. Thank you for that. We are going to talk about when the winds will die down across Nova Scotia. That's going to come up with Rhythm in a second. But Nate, we had this interesting question on YouTube. Someone asked if the power is out at Peggy's Cove, what is powering the lighthouse? And of course, I didn't know that answer off the top of my head, but Jenny, one of our producers behind the scenes, she said that the general consensus is multiple sources note that modern lighthouses run on their own power generators. So is that common knowledge in Atlantic Canada, Nate, or would you have had to Google that one?
I would have had to Google that one, so that's great. That's why we have Jenny here. So she's helping us out. I know probably the John who gave us the coffee earlier, he may have been able to tell us that one. I do know I've done stories before about people being angry that lighthouses, which look so scenic, you know, they've been replaced by just poles with a light on them. So we don't like it when that happens. So I'm glad this lighthouse is still here, still has power, so it can warn any incoming sailors. But hopefully they got the warning in advance and are off the water by this point.
Yeah, hopefully they are tuned into this live stream and they are keeping connected with us here at the Weather Network. Of course, your best source when it comes to hurricane season in the Atlantic. Nate, I'm going to give you a break. We got some questions that we're going to answer from YouTube. Try and get comfy for a second. I know I can't say get dry because that is almost impossible right now. But we're going to get back to Nathan Coleman shortly. Rhythm. Let's first talk about when the winds are going to die down, and then I've got about 3 questions here from YouTube that we're going to get to.
Okay.
So when will those winds calm down?
So those winds are going to calm down once the system starts to move through. So in areas of Yarmouth, we can see them coming down to around 60. Then again, for this overnight period, then again, it is generally breezy along that coast, but the actual system, as it moves towards the north, Sunday morning is probably going to be our best time for those winds to start calming down until like Sunday afternoon and evening. But they are going to move up towards Newfoundland, but Newfoundland is used to all this breezy weather. Even if we get up to 70 kilometers an hour, it's just a regular day for them.
A normal day in Newfoundland. All right, Bob Thompson asked, as more and more people are without power, I was wondering at what wind speed is deemed safe for line crews to start venturing out and restoring power. So Nathan Coleman was joining us, and he just mentioned that it's 80 kilometers an hour. The winds have to be less than that for them to get up in the bucket. Now, in terms for teams to get out on the roads, I'm not exactly sure that wind speed, but up in the bucket is 80 kilometers an hour. And while we are on the topic of power outages, I will let you know, in Halifax, we do have 118,000 without power. That number has actually slightly come down. So it looks like some people have been put back on the grid, which is, of course, amazing news. In New Brunswick, we're still looking at just over 15,000 without power. That's 138 outages. And then within PEI, the latest number, 5 now without power. So that has slightly grown, but not as much as Nova Scotia, that's for sure. Now, a couple more questions from YouTube. Rhythm, this one is for you. Let's talk about Fredericton. What are some of the wind gusts looking like for Fredericton? That is a question from Kaylee.
So let's take a look at Fredericton right now. We're up to about 70 kilometers an hour, which are quite gusty winds in through that more inland area. But as we go through the day, again, as the system makes its way through, we can get to see those wind gusts topping above 80 kilometers an hour before they start to settle back down as we head towards that later evening into the night period as the system crosses over.
Okay, next question is from Lan, and this is a great question because if you're ever contemplating travel, my advice is if you have a feeling of not doing it, don't do it. But here's the question. Can anyone advise that driving back to Halifax from Fredericton might be safe on Monday? So Monday is the key word in that question.
So I think Nathan put it quite well, where he's like, for 72 hours after a system has passed, then that's when you're still going to need that time to clean things up and everyone getting that power back. So maybe not Monday, even if it is a clear day, just give it a couple more days after that.
Yeah, of course. If it's something absolutely dire and you need to get for Halifax to Fredericton, it looks like on Monday, at least the skies will be clear. Yeah. The cloud cover will be diminishing. The winds won't be as strong anymore. But that really is such a good point, Rhythm, because if the trees are down on roads, that is going to take some time. Sunday, I'm sure, is going to be a lot of prep and planning and some action, but Monday will likely be a big action day in terms of restoring a lot of those roads.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a look at the system. This is a live look at Peggy's Cove. You can just see how horrible the conditions are. Peggy's Cove, by the way, is completely closed. You cannot go to Peggy's Cove. A question here on YouTube, will Dartmouth have the same impact as Halifax? I think that's a kind of an easy one to say yes. You know, right across the waterway, the impacts will be very similar.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think maybe just going back to our warnings and alerts, we still do have those tropical storm warnings as well as that surge right along that coast. So if you're near Halifax, Dartmouth is not too far away from there.
You can see it.
You can see it. You're still going to have those similar impacts when it comes to the rainfall as well as those winds.
Okay. Now, in terms of alerts, can we inform the audience of any more alerts that have been coming up from Environment Canada? Is there anything else on top of this? Do we have anything that shows, let's say, rainfall warning or wind warning, that kind of thing?
So we don't have rainfall warning as of right now. We still have that hurricane watch in place in through areas of the Halifax Metro County all the way down to Digby and Yarmouth.
Okay.
Yeah. And then when it does come to the rainfall warning, we will have those rainfall warnings are in place as those rainfall rates. So we've talked so much about those downpours that are going to be happening, and those rates can get anywhere from 10 millimeters up to 20 millimeters an hour.
And it all is sort of encompassed in the tropical cyclone statement, right? So that's sort of how the messaging gets pushed from Environment Canada. If you head to Environment Canada's website, a lot of our audience was asking, how do you stay up to date? You can do that on the Weather Network's app and on our channel, but Environment Canada's website, you can actually read the statements in full detail. So it is a great source for Canadians to learn more about your weather story, and it'll also time out the exact impacts and if there is the potential for some peak wind gusts and that sort of thing. So you can kind of get a bit of a deeper dive, because we know that this time of year, it does bring that storm anxiety into a lot of Canadians.
Absolutely. And that storm anxiety is, well, it's understandable.
Totally.
Right? These storms, you never know how they're going to act. Last weekend, me and you, Rachel, we were talking for so long about, is this system going to move to the right, to the left? And that anxiety builds over such a long period of time. So it's completely understandable. And with something as unpredictable as these storms, it's going to stick around.
Totally. And when you look at the hurricane forecast and that cone of uncertainty, it really does play into the emotions of a lot of people thinking about where this storm will go. Thank you so much for joining us. You are watching the Weather Network, where TV audience is coming back in. The conversation, it continues when it comes to Lee, a post-tropical storm. Rhythm, if you could highlight what you think will be the most impactful part of this storm and where, what would you put the bullseye on?
I would put the bullseye on the rain.
Okay.
As high as those winds are getting, and in through areas of Halifax, we are starting to look at over close to 117 kilometers an hour. But that rainfall, especially already in an area that's been so overly saturated, those trees toppling over is going to be a really big day for cleanup over the next couple of days.
Absolutely. All right, Nathan Coleman is coming back into the picture, and for our TV audience, if you're just joining us, 121,000 without power in Nova Scotia. That number has actually just gone up again over the last few minutes. 28,000, oh wow, almost 29,000 now without power in New Brunswick. That has also spiked, and within PEI, still looking at just 5 outages. So I want to bring Nathan Coleman back into the picture. Nate is at Peggy's Cove. Peggy's Cove is completely closed. We were kind of joking earlier, you cannot go down to Peggy's Cove for a meet and greet with Nathan Coleman today. But Nate, you know what? In all seriousness, I think we should set that up. I would fly down. Rhythm would fly down.
I would fly down 100%.
Good morning, Nate.
Well, good morning. Not right now. We have a bit of a developing situation here, and we have a red house that's right over my shoulder on the corner here, and we have been keeping an eye on this. It's right on the water, and we've just seen it tilt downward. So the storm surge is just surrounding this house, and it just literally moved in front of our eyes. And I mean, to me, this is reminiscent of what happened in Port aux Basques last year. Like, I mean, so many fishing communities, you have houses that are right along the water. They've been there for so many years, but you get a storm event like this that is unusual with the wind direction here and the size of the waves and storm surge. And so we'll go down a little closer to take a look at that. But very dangerous conditions down here when you actually see a house move. You know, our camera operator, Dave Hodge, he's been focused on that house and just witnessed it move down there, and you can see bigger waves continuing to come in near it.
Wow, Nate, that is an incredible story that you have been able to capture live for us on TV and on the live stream. And Nate, I think this speaks to that bigger messaging. Yesterday, when people were saying, the government and meteorologists, nothing good can come out of going down to the waterfront to check out this storm making its way on land. And it really is a situation like this that can change in a split second, right?
Yes, and you, of course, want to listen to your municipal officials. I mean, if you live right along the waterfront, if you have a home there and you see the water coming that close, you need to get out. It's time to move further inland if that's your situation. Sometimes we do have you know, a voluntary evacuation order that gets issued, and I haven't heard of anything like that as of yet. But when you look at what's going on just behind me, you can see why you don't want to be sitting waiting for the last minute. You want to get out if the water is getting that close to your property.
Okay, Nate, we are going to be continuing this live stream for about the next 20 minutes before we wrap things up. So we are for sure going to check in with Nathan Coleman again so we can get an update on that. Nate, the swells, they look incredible behind you, and I just want to update the audience now on storm surge in Halifax. About 30 minutes ago, we told you that the storm surge was close to a meter, but Rhythm, those numbers have now changed.
Yeah, so the observation has actually gone all the way up to 2.5 meters in through areas of Halifax. When we are looking at the projection over the rest of the day, they are eventually going to fall down, decrease as the system moves. However, 2.5 meters is quite high for that storm surge, and I think that's what we're going to be seeing a lot of the damage, especially for any homes as well as trees that are closer to the shore.
Absolutely. Now, we do know that the tide will continue to go down as we go throughout this morning and into the afternoon in Halifax. So that will change a bit of the situation when it comes to the surge, but that could be a peak. We could continue to see this grow. It's something that really could change minute by minute. Just even through this live stream, we've seen these numbers change so much. We were looking at some of the wind gusts in Halifax at 70, and we thought that was impressive. Now look at the numbers.
117 kilometers an hour.
So we're really starting to see things whip up and change. In Greenwood, Nova Scotia, 93 kilometers an hour. A lot of people on YouTube Rhythm are still commenting and asking about the worst of the winds. You know, I think wind, it can be such a scary part of the storm because we know the damage can be serious. It can be widespread. Can we talk a little bit more about the wind and also just towards Kentville as well?
Yeah.
And just some of the wind in that direction.
Yeah, so these winds winds, as high as they've been, they're going to stick around for the morning, especially through areas of Halifax, stretching into your afternoon and evening. Now, once we start to get in towards that overnight period, we can see a bit of a break. But in through Kentville, we are looking at winds closer to Halifax being around 117 right now. Maybe we can get a value just from one of the MPs, what it is right now, because we are noticing that just as the system continues to move, that wraparound behind it, just in through here, that's where you're going to get those strongest winds. Now, we're going to continue to monitor these winds, and they're going to continue for the rest of the day. So this is not going to be just a couple of hours. It's going to be, well, through the most of the day. And as we head towards the overnight, as the system moves, that's when we can see a little bit of a break from all of those winds.
All right. And now, speaking of winds and power outages, just bringing you the latest here. The power outages, they've gone up and down across Nova Scotia. We're at 117,000 right now without power. In New Brunswick, almost 29,000 without power, and PEI, not to forget, you still have about 5 outages reported in PEI. So as we look at the intensity of this storm, we are about to wrap up our live stream within the next 15 minutes, or actually the next 7 minutes. But we do know that the weather that we are going to endure over the day today, Saturday is the highest impact day when it comes to Lee. You can see the bands of rain and how heavy they are, especially moving over the Fundy Shores in towards places like southern Maine. A few breaks in the rain though, and Rhythm, I just want to reiterate to the audience, that doesn't mean the storm's over.
Absolutely not. Let's take a look at the satellite in order to better understand what's going on with this system.
And it looks so good.
And it looks so good. Like the sun rising over it, stunning. So when we're taking a look at these bands of rain, we do see that kind of band right around here in Halifax getting a little bit more sparse, and that
close to the downtown, really.
Exactly. That doesn't mean that it's going to be over by any means. What is happening is that as this wraps around this system towards its center, it's going to continue to bring more rain in through the area, but we're going to get those breaks, and then it's going to wrap around once again, and then we're going to get those breaks. So it doesn't mean that it's stopping by any means, and the system's not going to stop, but we will have those breaks. But those heavy rain accumulations are still forecasted to get towards those higher amounts, especially more inland as we get towards more of that center.
Now, for the audience that has been staying with us on the live stream, there's a lot of questions that have been coming in about that red house with Nathan Coleman. So I want to see if we can bring Nate back into the picture. Just wondering what is happening with that situation. Duke Lyons asked on YouTube, how long has that house been standing there? I definitely cannot answer that for you right now. But let's see if we can bring our live shot from Peggy's Cove back. Hey, Nate. Okay, Nate is with us now. Nate, just give us the latest and another view of that house. I think it's captured really a lot of people on TV and on YouTube just to show the ferocity and how things can change so quickly.
Yeah, we'll take a look. We tried to get a little closer down to the house, and we had to move back because the waves are so close. We ourselves don't want to get stuck down there, but you can take a look at the angle it's tilted at. You can see the surf just pounding against the rocks right next to it. So you can see it's obviously not on its foundation, and oh, here comes just a massive wave coming in. So it's just, you know, continuous pounding, and there it is. Wow, big wave there, and very dangerous to be anywhere around that area here. And you know, this is just that's the entrance to the Cove. The Cove is quite sheltered on a normal day, but now the waves and the storm surge has been pushing up here. And if you want to pan around, you can even see the fishing boats here. The water level is right up nearly to the top of the wharf, and you can see the lobster shacks that are here. You know, they're completely inundated with water here. It's so high, so there is water flooding into the shacks in this sheltered cove. It's just so much water, and the fishermen are on their boats. They're changing the lines. They're trying to, you know, maintain as much as they can, but there's only so much you can do when you're contending with this amount of water just flowing in.
Absolutely. Nathan Coleman, your coverage this morning has been so fantastic. TV audience is just joining us now, looking at some of the images behind you. Can you just take the next 20 seconds just to show that red house just one more time so the TV audience can see?
Yes, we'll go back to the red house, and you know, when we started the broadcast, that was looking level, and it was over my shoulder. We were talking, even mentioning it. It's so close to the water, and our camera operator noticed it just moved up and tilted back. So definitely concerned that another big wave could come and hit it, potentially take it, but we'll continue to watch it. And once we end the broadcast, we'll probably go to the other side of the cove to get a better look at it. But it's just way too dangerous to get anywhere near it right now because of these waves just keep pounding in. And it is a little bit of a more low-lying area than where we're standing right now with this vantage point.
Absolutely. Okay, Nathan Coleman, I want you to get dry, get comfortable, get that second coffee that you ordered this morning. We will be wrapping up this live stream in just about 2 minutes, but I do want to remind our audience that Nathan Coleman is not off the hook. He is going to be joining us throughout the afternoon when we do have a second part to this live stream with Sophia Kambalia, and that will be broadcast on our channel on YouTube as well as the app. So the live stream is ending for now, but the impacts of this storm are still going to be felt as we go throughout the day today. So don't worry, we've got you covered when it comes to this coverage. Now, one more question from YouTube, Elizabeth Robinson. Is it possible for the eye of the storm to reform off Yarmouth?
Listen, I can understand why someone might worry about that because, of course, if it gets stronger, then larger impacts. But luckily, we do sit in a place where we have those cooler waters, so it's not as much access to those warmer waters to allow that re-intensification. On top of that, just to highlight one other thing, we have a lot of dry, cold air that is being sucked in right around behind here. Now, dry air as well as those cooler waters is going to be making it weaker rather than stronger.
All right, Rhythm, thank you so much for joining me on this live stream this morning. It has been extremely interesting watching this storm essentially become reclassified as a post-tropical storm, but also seeing and witnessing the impacts and what people are feeling in Atlantic Canada today. I want to remind our audience on the app, on TV, and on YouTube, the Weather Network is your best source when it comes to hurricane season in Atlantic Canada and for your forecast right across the country. Don't worry, we still have the story of Lee that will unfold today across New Brunswick, PEI, and Nova Scotia, and we'll be here to tell you the story. Thanks for joining us.